We will hear welcome remarks from Jessica Webb, Strategy Lead, People and Forest Protection at the World Resources Institute. And then we will hear from Charlotte Bishop, Director of Emerging Markets, Earth Observations from KSAT, leading partner of the NICFI Satellite Data Program. We will then move on to our use case sharing, starting with André Campos, journalist from Reporter Brazil. Then Phil Aikman, campaign manager, together with Jackson Harris, senior geospatial analyst at Mighty Earth. And Cristina Volmer Borelli, founder of SOS Orinoco, will wrap us up. After listening from our speakers, we will have the time for Q&A, like I mentioned. So really, please share your questions as the webinar proceeds. Thank you. Yeah, we can move on. And now we're going to start with Jessica providing us with opening remarks. Jessica.
Yeah, thank you so much, Luisa, and thank you all for being here with us today. As many of you probably know, Global Forest Watch is an online platform and suite of tools. It was launched in 2014 with the goal of democratizing data and making information on forest change available that historically was not available to most. With this free and open platform and related suite of tools, users can zoom in to anywhere on the planet to learn about forest landscape dynamics, analyze trends in forest change, track progress towards public and private sector commitments, and identify threats in near real time with deforestation and fire alerts. Thanks to the NICFI Satellite Data Program, users can also access recent and historical high-resolution satellite imagery from Planet directly through GFW tools. In a few moments, I'll hand it over to Charlotte to tell us more about this program. Next slide, please. But first, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge a very important milestone. Global Forest Watch is turning 10 years old this year. Today and throughout the year, we will be recognizing the impact of GFW, which wouldn't be possible without key partners, users, and community members like yourselves who share our mission to protect, restore, and sustainably manage forests everywhere. Next slide. Today's webinar kicks off the first in a series of events, stories, and videos throughout the year, which will highlight the successes of Global Forest Watch users, partners, and community members. We're pleased to feature the innovative and impactful ways our panelists have coupled data from Global Forest Watch and Planet with other sources of information to expose deforestation and catalyze action. And with that, I'll hand it over to Charlotte to tell us a bit more about the NICFI Satellite Data Program. Over to you, Charlotte.
Thank you so much, Jessica. And echoing Jessica's comments, it's a pleasure to be here today and have the opportunity to share a little bit more about the NICFI Satellite Data Program. Perhaps that's new to some of you who are listening today. And more importantly, to show how this data is accessible through the Global Forest Watch platform, as Jessica's just introduced, and then use that as a kind of context placer for the use cases that will be presented by our guest speakers this afternoon. Next slide, please. So to give a little bit of context and just to kind of step back a bit for what kind of led to the NICFI Satellite Data Program. Traditionally, satellite data that has been used for deforestation or forest analysis, land management analysis, has been typically low spatial resolution, so low detail. In this case, this is an example of Landsat data, where we can see some field parcels and the red polygons there highlighting some areas that have been marked as areas of change, areas of clearing. And if we step to the next slide, we can see the same area at a higher spatial resolution, so much more detail, where we're seeing the red polygons there much more clearly defined. And this is from the satellite data program data, so PlanetScope data at about 5 meter, spatial resolution. So we're seeing a step change from 30-meter resolution that has been more historically available to the 5-meter spatial resolution data that's available as part of this program. So that's really kind of the context that's been provided that kind of led to the NICFI Satellite Data Program and the intention from NICFI, which is Norway's International Climate and Forest Initiative, which is part of the Norwegian Ministry for Climate and Environment, who funded this program to make this data available. The lower spatial resolution data has traditionally been more publicly accessible in terms of both low price point, if not free, plus very accessible, no challenging licensing. And so this program is intended to do is to reduce those barriers to access. And by purchasing this data and making it accessible in this way, it's possible to reduce some of those barriers where cost and licensing has been more challenging for a number of users. And this way, the intention was to make this as publicly available as possible. So if we go to the next slide, please. A bit of a recap on the program in terms of the intention and the purpose. So the purpose of the program is specifically to reduce and reverse the loss of tropical forests through the kind of reducing and reversing the loss of tropical forests and contributing to combating climate change. So how can satellite data be used as part of the practices that users, different types of users, are already kind of integrating? How could this data integrate with existing practices to help inform better decisions, support better monitoring and reporting? And I have some examples a little bit later on that explain this in a little bit more detail. But maybe if we go to the next slide and we can show the extent of the program. So you'll see at the bottom of this slide, you'll see a number of logos. Hopefully they're not quite masked by the controls from Zoom, but I can summarize them briefly. So NICFI is the party who funded this. As I mentioned, this is the Norwegian government who's made this program possible. They contracted that service delivery to KSAT, which is Kongsberg Satellite Services, as Louisa introduced. And then the other two partners in the program are Planet and Airbus, and it is their satellite data that helps make this program possible and accessible. And really the PlanetScope data is the core of this program. So what you see on the screen here, everywhere you see an image is where this program covers. So it covers approximately 45 million square kilometers of the tropical forest region. And this whole area imaged on the screen here is the area of the program. So we don't just provide coverage over simply forested areas, we provide coverage of forest countries, so where they will have forested areas and perhaps some other non-forest or semi-forest areas as well. So this is designed as complete a program as possible to cover those tropical forest areas between 30 degrees north and south, which is why you see some areas that don't quite reach 30 degrees north, because they don't have any forested or any significant forest areas within their country boundaries. And really, this is an unprecedented type of service and type of offering that's been made available with commercial satellite data, and in this way through a public procurement from the Norwegian government. So this has generated the opportunity to explore how this type of data can be used in this way, and how these types of programs can really be a benefit to as many groups of users as possible. And the types of users that we have within the program vary from forest country governments to media to civil society, NGOs, and some of those, of course, we will hear from today. Next slide, please. So to summarize a little bit what the data products are, what's actually available within this program. I've already mentioned the extent of the program, and I've added that image on this slide as well, just as a reminder. But every month we provide two different types of mosaic, and a mosaic here is like a base map, so similar terminology if you're used to one versus the other. And we provide these in two different ways. So we provide a visually optimized base map and also an analysis ready scientific base map. Both are available at 5 meter spatial resolution, both cover the same area, and both are released at the same time. So whether your application is more visual focused, where a simple comparison of the data is visually is what makes it easier for your analyses, or whether you want to dive more deeply into that data and do more specific indices and arithmetic applications on the data. Within Global Forest Watch, we have the visually optimized data, and we'll talk a little bit about that and where you see that data in Global Forest Watch a little bit later on. And it's just important to note here as well that every month we release the mosaics. They cover the entire region that you see on the screen. So we are not just updating part of these areas. We are updating that whole region every time we release a new mosaic. So I've talked about monthly mosaics. So that started when the program began in September 2020, and that runs until the program ends, which is in September 2024. But we also have some biannual mosaics as well. So we do have some historical data from the program from December 2015 to December 2020, and those are biannual, so every 6 months within that period. We've talked about PlanetScope data here, and you may have noted that Airbus is also a partner. Airbus data is part of a different level of access that we're not going to discuss today. But should you have questions on that at all, then we can either address that in the Q&A or follow up directly with you. Next slide, please. I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes just talking about how the satellite data program has been helping to contribute to improvements within forest monitoring. And we have a lot of users, like many of you joining, I hope, who are using this data already within Global Forest Watch tools and who are able to address some of these challenges that we see within deforestation mapping and land management activities by using this data as part of the activities. So we are seeing opportunities to improve statistics for reporting, as we saw in those first slides, a significant step change in the level of spatial detail, how much easier it is to kind of quantify the land area that's affected. It can also provide us more insights into the causes of change, where we can see data at a regular cadence over the area and have more cloud-free data, then that allows us to also help identify perhaps what caused that change. And one thing I should mention here as well is that historical data was quite infrequent in terms of collections, perhaps a collection every 2 weeks in that kind of domain. The benefit of the PlanetScope data, even though we're only providing monthly mosaics, is that we have daily collection of imagery. So we're actually able to reduce the impact of cloud across this region. So in very persistent cloud-covered areas where Landsat, for example, or Sentinel-2, which you may also use, if there is a capture there that has cloud, it may be some days before there is a cloud-free opportunity. With a daily or near-daily collect with Planet data, that allows us to actually reduce the impact that has and allows us to have as much as possible a cloud-free or near cloud-free within country, because we're getting that very high cadence of imagery. It also allows us to look at near real-time, semi-near real-time changes in land cover. So month to month, that data is released as quickly as possible into the next month, usually within the first 1 to 2 weeks of the previous month end. And therefore allows us to look at that kind of time series of change that is important, of course, for a number of our activities. It's also helping across the private sector as well in terms of internal monitoring of zero deforestation commitments and carbon credits. And so understanding how this data can support different types of users is a big part of what we're doing as a program team, and also how we can help the users understand and use this data. And ultimately, the idea being it helps to not only reduce and reverse tropical forest deforestation, but also helps improve decision-making and land management activities as much as possible. Next slide, please. So I've just made a short video here of how you can access this data on Global Forest Watch. So I'm not seeing, is it moving? Here we go. Okay, so the Global Forest Watch map, you don't need to sign in. It's very easy to use. So you can just go to globalforestwatch.org and select map. You can then select planet data directly as a base map. You'll see that populate with the default layers which appear when Global Forest Watch launches. Just going to wait for it to zoom in. There we go. And we can also then zoom in. You can see the base maps have just populated behind the layers. So we can zoom into areas of interest for our application. We can remove the layers that are they're loaded by default, but we can remove any layers that we don't want. We can also step through a time series. We can do that using the time slider functionality that you'll see there, or also using the drop down and selecting the months that might be of interest to our application. We can also find out more about the imagery. What does this data layer provide? So that will give you more information about the satellite data program, how to cite the data, and all those kind of informations. And then we can add other layers that are already existing within Global Forest Watch, like the RAD and GLAD alerts, fire alerts, and use that with the NICFI satellite data program data to help understand some of those changes. So that's really where the power comes in, using this data in existing tools, because we're able to then see that directly with other data sets that we may already be using and be familiar with. And you'll see there's quite a list of other layers that we can also use and integrate with this data. So I think that's my very short kind of demonstration. I'll just step on to talk about a little bit about our resources before I close out and pass to back to Louisa, who will introduce our speakers. So we have a number of different resources available. They're all available at www.planet.com/NICFI, which will be on the next slide. And we have resources there that provide information on frequently asked questions, user guides, courses that you can take that help you understand how you can use this data, webinars. So today's webinar will also be populated in there when it becomes available. We also have a community forum where people can chat together with other users and ask questions. We have a help desk as well. So we have a 24/7 help desk where if you have any questions about access or any other challenges with the program, then we're here to help. And that equally goes the same if you're using Global Forest Watch and/or Planet tools as well. And we can coordinate, of course, with the Global Forest Watch team to address those. And then a number of examples of user stories that you might find helpful. We have an X or Twitter account. We also have a GitHub repository as well that we're always populating with new code that we find. And if you have code that you would like us to include in that, please do let us know. We'd really like to ensure we keep this as comprehensive as possible. And with that, I think it's my last slide next, which includes the link to our kind of project page for this program. And Louisa, I will pass back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Charlotte, and thank you for that overview. I think for the attendees that are not familiar with the NICFI satellite data program, this was great to have an introduction and a lot of detail, actually, to start with. And now we are really happy to be hearing from our first speaker, André Campos from Reporter Brazil. André, are you ready to share with us?
Hi, hello everybody. Thanks a lot for the invitation to speak here about planet and satellite use today. It's really a pleasure because using those tools have become such an important part of our work here in Brazil. Just complementing a little bit about my organization, I work in an NGO, Reporter Brazil, which is dedicated to journalists, but also to research to support advocacy work of other NGOs and groups around the world. And a lot of what we do is monitor on the ground here in Brazil violations of human rights, labor issues, but also environmental crimes and deforestation, with a particular focus on supply chains, how those crimes, those issues that we have here in our country are connected to global markets, and how we can monitor, this from the very first stages of how material producing until the final consumers. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about how we do it with the help of satellite monitoring systems. Next slide, please. So here is just a very quick summary of our methodology of how we work here in Brazil, trying to track down deforestation and environmental crimes in supply chains. First of all, for us, it's an ongoing. We are always looking for databases and sources and all types of access that could give us trade data linking what we believe are key supply chains, key products that have strong ties with deforestation and other issues, how we can link this to the market, to financiers, to buyers, and once we have that kind of information, linking a particular farm, a particular farmer to a particular company, we always go to the next step, that is trying to plot this area into a map. We are always also trying to access here in Brazil information about the geographic coordinates that are where these places are, the places that are linked to deforestation, recent deforestation in the Amazon, in the Cerrado. And then having this information, a map of a farm to put in a layer, and data that links this particular area to a particular buyer or market. We can conduct this analysis based on satellite imagery tools in these farm areas, just to see if they are complying with many of the Brazilian regulations related to environmental crimes, but also with something that Charlotte just mentioned, that are the zero deforestation commitments that corporations already have, and also some public policies related to zero deforestation that we have in place right now. And in this next slide, I'm going to present just a case study on how this turns into a concrete situation. Those here are some examples of investigations that we have published in the recent past. We published many times together with other media in partnership, like with The Guardian, for instance. And here we have two stories that they are both linked to kind of the same issue, which is companies that are buying soy from farms in the Amazon, and that in contexts that are not compliant with particular corporate standards that have been in place for quite a long time. In fact, right now, I'm talking about the soy moratorium that we have. Basically, the largest traders, soy traders, grain traders that we have operating in Brazil right now, and those are the big companies in the world on food trading, Cargill, Bunge, Imagery, etc. They have committed not to buy soy from planted in areas that were deforested in the Amazon after 2008. And part of our work here is try to see how this is being fulfilled on the ground, really. And here we have some examples of cases where we could find information linking particular companies to particular farming areas, and satellite analysis allowed us to realize that actually the commitments were not being respected. So next slide, I'm going to show a little bit how the images itself help us to understand that. That's investigation here actually was investigation published, I think, in 2022. It was about a farmer in the Amazon, a farming area that we were able to track down as a Cargill supplier. Cargill is the largest grain trader in the world. And basically plotting this farm in a map allowed us to understand that there was, in fact, recent deforestation in this farm. And soy, you can see here, and that's the typical use that we do with the mosaics that Charlotte just mentioned, how the evolution of this area over time. So you have like 2007, before, the soy moratorium cutoff date. It was a forest in this place, and then you start to have deforestation taking place in 2013, 2012. Here you see this process here in this next image. And after that, we also start to see, as you can see in this 2021 image, a layer that reveals plantations here aligned with the dates of the soy cropping season here in Brazil. And actually, we do have some tools, including in Global Forest Watch, where you can analyze the type of land use that's being done in a particular area, cattle raising or soy plantation, things like that. We use this as an initial tool also to monitor this kind of situation. But then basically using this kind of satellite imagery analysis, we were able to see and really confirm that you did have a situation of soy being produced in an area where theoretically it shouldn't be that kind of product, at least not linked to companies that are committed to the soy moratorium. That's one example, very typical. We are always doing this all the time. It's an ongoing procedure for us. Next slide, I'm going to speak about another type of use that we also do to track down deforestation in supply chains, which is linked to the idea of, just preparing on the groundwork. Last year, we have published together with other organizations an investigation showing how, forest fires in Brazil were taking place in areas that were producing grains and soy, again, to large traders linked to international markets. And how we did this. First, I think that there are two different steps that both use, satellite monitoring systems for us to be in that position to be able to report some situation like that. First, how the forest fires work in Brazil. They usually take place in a particular season of the year, during the dry season here in Brazil, around July to October, more or less. And those fires, usually they take place in areas that were recently deforested, because, setting fire on this area is the next stage, just to clear the land for starting new production there. So in a first moment, we just monitored recent deforestation areas, and in the Amazon over the last months, just to have an idea of areas that should be eligible to be on fire, likely to be on fire during the firing season. And then with a map of these areas, of potential areas where fire are going to take place during the season, we just put the team on the ground just to wait and see if the situation were going to take place, and then to be able to record and track in real time on the ground those fires, and then their impacts over nature in the Amazon. In the next slide, I'm going to show you the second step, how we can do this. So yeah, please just go next slide. So we have our team on the ground, and we have another team, at desk work, monitoring at daily basis areas that are going to be on fire close to the locations of our teams on the ground. And by doing this and keeping internal communication, we just give indications of areas that are being set on fire, recent fires, and then we just move our group, just to film, just to try to obtain the local data about supply chain linkages of these recently deforested areas now being set on fire, and do a work that could allow us to record this in real time and bring these evidences to discuss also corporate commitments around illegal practice, illegal environmental crimes, environmental crimes like this kind of fire that we have so commonly here in Brazil. And that's it. I think that I'm going to stop here my presentation. We can talk more in the Q&A session. There's this video that our our hosts are going to share with you in the chat. Basically, is just like a short documentary that about this last investigation that I just mentioned, and show how this, this satellite work help us to get to a reporting product where we can show to the public, to the audience, how deforestation happens on the ground and their impacts over the nature. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Andre. This was a great overview of how your work has been done, or one of the ways that you work with this kind of data and information. And I think it's really helpful to illustrate how this could be done by other people. And now we're going to continue with Mighty Earth and their examples of how they work in deforestation-free supply chains tracking. You are muted, Phil.
Yeah,
Now we can hear
Thanks.
you. Perfect.
Thanks. I'm Phil Aitman, a campaign director for Mighty Earth. We're a Washington-based organization, but we work in all parts of the world tackling issues of deforestation. Can you go to the next slide, please? On to the next slide. So about 7 years ago, basically 80% of the world's palm oil trade adopted no deforestation policies. And at the time, a lot of the companies didn't really have their own comprehensive monitoring systems, or it varied by the traders and the biofuel companies, refiners. So Mighty Earth decided to launch rapid response deforestation monitoring system to basically assess the industry, how they were complying with these policies. So the basic foundations of this system is access to the right quality of data, so access to concession data, access to high resolution satellite imagery, which we've been kind enough to get the plant data through NICFI for the last 7 years, and also supply chain data. So a lot of the palm oil industry publish what they call mill lists, which identifies the coordinates of a mill relative to a concession. As part of these policies that the companies have adopted, they've adopted what we call a group-wide approach, which is basically that they may be, a company in the supply chain may be buying from a mill in Sumatra, but the same group is clearing forests in Kalimantan. So the clearing in the concession in Kalimantan is still non-compliant with those group-wide policies. So over the last 7 years, we've published 42 rapid response reports on palm oil, about 720 cases with over 70,000 hectares of possible non-compliant deforestation or peatland development. So these reports are sent to basically about 30 traders, biofuel companies, and other manufacturers who have no deforestation policies, but they also have grievance protocols. So we're filing these reports as grievances with these companies to get them to investigate. The outcomes are varied. Sometimes the companies will adopt a no deforestation policy off the back of these grievances or other engagement with these companies. Sometimes, if there's no interest or not willingness, the trader will suspend that supplier, and sometimes those suppliers eventually want to come back. Sometimes some of the traders don't really act very well, and they kind of sit on these cases for a long period of time. So it's very varied according to each company. So if you go to the next slide, I'm just going to present one particular case that sort of illustrates the challenge to do with the data. So in one of our earlier reports, we highlighted deforestation in a concession owned by the Wigia Corp. And we filed this with the traders, and we had to keep publishing subsequent reports to get any action. You go to the next slide. So this is accessing the data through Global Forest Watch. So on the left, you'll see imagery, which is basically one of the planet mosaics. And on the right, you'll see the GLAD alerts overlaid across the planet imagery. So based on this imagery, it's pretty clear it's forest that's being cleared. If you go to the next slide. However, the palm industry, whilst they're part of their deforestation policies, they adopt what they call the high carbon stock approach, which basically means they require assessments to be done to assess the land cover according to some forest thresholds, including areas that are recovering forest. However, the assessor assessed the area that was cleared as shrub, therefore it was not required for the company to protect. We challenge this with the industry, and if you go to the next slide. And so we believe that the areas in red were actual deforestation and should have been areas that protected. If you go to the next slide. Eventually, after sort of engagement with the Secretariat of the High Carbon Stock Approach, engagement with some aggressive traders, the assessment was put through a peer review process, and the peer review process found that there were indeed forests. You go to the next slide. And the company eventually have agreed that they will actually compensate for the deforestation to the tune of 5,640 hectares. So this is still a work in progress, but eventually, the outcome of this entire process, we got to a result. So this is one of many cases. The cases are not always black and white and simple. The access to the planet 5-meter resolution imagery is very good for a lot of cases, but sometimes the resolution isn't high enough. We've more recently tasked Planet Satellite to go to certain areas and get 50-centimeter resolution, which is more you can see the forest canopy. I think that's it. I'm going to now hand over to my colleague Jackson, who's going to talk more broadly on other commodities. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. My name is Jackson. I'm a geospatial analyst for Mighty Earth. And so I'm going to talk about how we have seen the success in our methodology for the palm industry and have since sort of attempted to adopt that methodology to a variety of other industries, including cocoa, soy and beef, alongside Andre and Reporter Brazil. And more recently, what I'm going to focus on is our work in the minerals and extractive industry. Next slide, please. So our work in nickel was really spurred actually by planet imagery that I saw back in 2020, 2021, where we were investigating palm on the island of Maluku in Indonesia. And I came across this rapid expansion of what's called the Weda Bay nickel concession. And you could see just massive forest clearance events happening at a very rapid scale. And over the last year or so, we've really taken an interest in catching the commodity of nickel before it causes massive amounts of deforestation. So as you may know, in the coming years, we're really going to need to ramp up our production of electric vehicles, batteries, wind turbines, solar panels, etc. And these are really, really heavy mineral intensive technologies. And so in particular, batteries for electric vehicles right now require like massive amounts of nickel. So if you go to the next slide, please. And there have been in the World Bank projects that in the coming years, we really need to quadruple mineral production by 2050 in order to meet the rising demand for nickel and other minerals that are necessary for these clean energy technologies. And so between 2017 and 2022, for instance, we saw over a 40% demand for nickel increase, and EVs and batteries are expected to beat stainless steel as the largest user of nickel by 2040. So you go to the next slide, please. And so where is nickel found? Well, Indonesia is currently the largest producer of nickel. And nickel is found in what are called laterite nickel deposits, which is to say, essentially, it's mixed in with soil or topsoil. And so to access nickel and refine it to refine this soil into high quality nickel ore, you need to essentially clear the forest on top of these soils and extract massive amounts of soil. And so these are located primarily on the island of Sulawesi and across Maluku as well in Indonesia, which you can see a map of in the corner. Next slide, please. And so in recent years, we've seen this demand for nickel increase. We've also seen a correlation of deforestation alerts within Indonesian nickel concessions. And so this is a graph showing 2020 to 2023. We've also been looking back all the way back to the 2000s, and you see this steady increase in deforestation within nickel concessions. And nickel concessions that we're looking at were found on the Indonesian government's website for different nickel or mineral permitting shapefiles. So moving forward, please. Next slide. What we've done at this point is look at some of the major nickel concessions and attempted to track how the nickel refined in these particular concessions makes its way into the batteries of EVs. And so what you're looking at is a visualization of supply chain research that was done by the Rosa Luxemburg Institute in 2023, which allows us to have a starting sense of how refineries in Indonesia enter the supply chain and make their way down into eventually battery cathodes and eventually into EVs themselves. And so for the purposes of today's presentation, I'm going to focus on one company with one concession called Bintang Delapan Mineral, which we found is owned by two Indonesians and affiliated also with Tsingshan, which is a Chinese stainless steel and battery minerals conglomerate. So if you go to the next slide, we can see a visualization of Bintang Delapan's largest concession boundary on the island of Sulawesi. And this is visualized in Global Forest Watch, and you're looking at tree cover loss in pink since 2000, or 2001 rather. Since 2001, there's been over 3,000 hectares of forest loss alerts within this concession boundary. And since the concession was actually authorized, we've seen 2,700 hectares of forest loss alerts. And if you look at the next slide, we actually see that according to the IUCN, the Bintang Delapan mineral is also located within or overlaps a key biodiversity area as defined by the IUCN. So this means that there's really, really high rates of endemic flora and faunas and very, very particular special species within this area outlined in green. And you can also see further tree cover loss to the east and west and south. Most of this is nickel driven. And if you particularly look at this patch of red to the east, that is where the nickel is being refined in the Indonesia Morowali Industrial Park. So if we go to the next slide, please, we can see how using satellite imagery in Global Forest Watch in the platform provided through Planet, we can see what this actually looks like over the last 5 years or so. So if you click the next slide, we can see a significant difference in forest loss and forest cover. And then it's a little hard to see the black here. So the next two slides, one after the other, maybe we can toggle between them. You can see this visualization as well. So as I said, there's the Indonesia Morowali Industrial Park alongside this nickel concession. And you can also see just this clear pollution of rivers within the concession. If we go back to the 2018 image, the rivers do not take on this hue that's very distinctive for nickel mining. And you can see just massive sort of pollution and land clearance happening. So what are we going to do about this? Moving on to the next slides, please. We're currently in the process of publishing a white paper on nickel industry and specifically analyzing a few different pathways legally that we can lobby for EV companies and upstream nickel miners and refiners to cut out high deforestation nickel mines from their supply chains, and at the very least remediate these lands that are undergoing massive sort of extraction and pollution in Indonesia right now. And so we have seen some success, or hopefully we'll see some success with the upcoming EUDR, European Union Deforestation Regulation. And we're also able to draw on sort of legal pathways, for instance, in the US Inflation Reduction Act, the EU battery regulation, and the forthcoming EU critical minerals regulation, such that consumers can hold EV companies accountable to make sure that their supply chains aren't causing massive amounts of environmental destruction. And so what we're pushing for right now is really ensuring that beyond the visualization of the data from the Rosa Luxemburg Institute, we really understand nickel supply chains, and it's very clear where each EV company is sourcing their nickel from. This simple step of supply chain transparency has proven effective in other industries, as mentioned by Andre and Phil, for just helping us advocate for cleaner supply chains in general. We also urge EV companies and upstream refiners and miners to join in initiatives like the Initiative for Responsible Mining and Assurance, and then also are advocating for alternative and circular technologies. And so with that, my time is running short, and we will say thank you and look forward to any questions on it.
Thank you so much, Phil and Jackson. This was really comprehensive about your work at Mighty Earth and really significant advancements in bringing this kind of problems to light. So now, to close our speaker series, we're going to pass on to Cristina to share about her work in SOS Orinoco.
Thanks so much, and thank you to Planet, NICFI, KSAT, Global Forest Watch. Congratulations to Global Forest Watch on their anniversary. Thanks so much. We can go to the next slide. A little bit of context. In 2018, a small group of experts in Venezuela and I founded SOS Orinoco as an advocacy group to document and create an in-depth diagnostic of the region south of the Orinoco River, and to raise awareness about the tragedy that was occurring there and that is currently occurring, and also to outline urgent measures that need to be taken in order to halt this disaster. I have to say that most of the members of SOS Orinoco have been working anonymously. We conceal the names of team members and witnesses due to the high risk of doing this type of research in Venezuela. And so Venezuela is one of the 8 Amazonian countries and is currently under the rule of a dictator. So it is very difficult and very risky to do this type of work. One of our main objectives has been to determine the location and the size of illegal mining activity, and of course, the environmental and socioeconomic impact that this has in these 2 states that you can see on this slide. So it's the state of Amazonas and the state of Bolívar. This vast area, which is about 500,000 square kilometers, is one of the most biodiverse regions on Earth. And it's also home to 27 different indigenous groups that obviously are being affected by mining, illegal mining activities. And we can go to the next slide. So this is a little bit about how we work. At first, we used Landsat, Sentinel-2, Worldview imagery. And then when we found out about the Planet Explorer platform and its great advantages, our monitoring capacity greatly increased. The monthly mosaics, starting from 2015 to the present, with the daily satellite images, also increased our possibility of finding an area without cloud cover. And you have to be aware of the fact that in this part of the world, there is a lot of cloud cover. So thanks to the NICFI satellite data program, we've greatly improved our capacity to monitor the mining footprint. And this slide shows the difference between an image of the same region, so Landsat 2023 versus a Planet 2023 image. And NICFI has also allowed us to follow in real time the impact of mining in the Venezuelan Amazon. We're constantly monitoring illegal mining in this region, but today we're going to do sort of a deep dive into this particular region, which is the Icabarú River upper basin. And this is a tributary of the second largest river in Venezuela, the Caroni River. Next slide. So this is in red, this little box in red is the region that we're going to be focusing on. We have been monitoring the mining activity in the Icabarú River basin since 2018. But now we're focusing on this particular area right on the border between Venezuela and Brazil, where witnesses have been telling us that there's an increase of illegal mining and this an invasion of Brazilian wildcat miners, or otherwise known as garimpeiros. And we've been receiving complaints about the increase of mining activities from inhabitants in one of the population centers that are called El Paují. And interestingly, they've been telling us that one of the main causes is an illegal dirt road that Brazilians have made linking, well, that comes from Brazil, and you can see at the bottom of the red box, a little black line. That's the illegal dirt road that goes into Venezuelan territory. Next slide. Okay, so this is just an example, and a lot of this is going to echo what Charlotte was explaining earlier. This comparison shows the growth of mining in the same sector between October 2020 and January 2024. Next slide. So a little bit about our methodology. So obviously we go on the Planet Explorer page, we selected the November 2023 mosaic, selected our area of interest, we downloaded the images. Next slide. Then we did the necessary processing with QGIS, Quantum GIS, and exported mosaics in TIFF or TIF format. We vectorized the different layers, so we have mining, watercourses, population centers, roads, illegal roads, airstrips, illegal airstrips, etc. And we repeat this process and compare it with available mosaics from previous dates. You can go to the next slide. And all of these maps and then the animations that we do, and I'm going to show you how we animate these maps, are published on social media. So actually, if you can go back to the previous slide. Sorry. So in pink is the general area of study. In red, you're going to see the mining areas. Then you see the little black line that goes into Brazil. That's the illegal road. Okay, next slide. So this is an example of how we animate a map. So highlighting the expansion of illegal mining in Icabarú between September 2019 in green versus November 2023 in red. And what we determined is that there was an increase of 1,165 hectares in 4 years. So early on, when SOS Orinoco got started, we only had satellite images of illegal areas. It's impossible to fly or to send people to take photos in these remote places. So the challenge was how to explain to the public what these images were showing. So we came up with the idea of doing short videos with texts, with narration, even background music, and posting them on our social media. And to our surprise, they went viral. Next slide. So this is another kind of product. We create these sort of visual flyovers that close in on specific mining areas. And these videos are super impactful in Venezuela, where the state has instilled fear, has a monopoly on information, and there's no freedom of the press. So until SOS Orinoco started publishing these little videos and animations in 2018, people in Venezuela, but also international media outlets, multilaterals like the UN, OECD, governments such as the United States, Canada, EU, etc., had no idea that this was going on, nor the severity of the problem. And we can go to the next slide. So in conclusion, for us, the NICFI satellite data program has allowed us to follow in real time the impact of illegal mining in the Venezuelan Amazon, and it has allowed us to denounce what is going on in a very remote part of the world that is otherwise close to the media and NGOs. In an autocratic country like Venezuela, access to programs such as the NICFI satellite data program is of vital importance because we're able to cut through government censoring. The previous video that I showed was published a couple of days ago, edited with text and background music. We published it on our Twitter account just 3 days ago, and it has more than 22,000 views. And media outlets in Venezuela are covering the news of this illegal road, just as an example of the impact that we're having. And we've noticed that having access to real-time, high-resolution images and data has allowed us to show what's going on in real time, but also it has forced the autocracy to accept that illegal mining is a fact. And so now state and armed forces officials actually talk about illegal mining, and they're on the defensive rather than ridiculing and dismissing us, which is what happened at the beginning. So we believe that not everyone in the Venezuelan armed forces and state are in agreement with this type of mining. And the fact that SOS Orinoco is publishing and making this information visible helps to enrich a discussion within a pretty untransparent regime, and we believe is empowering internal dissent. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, and thanks so much, and we wait for your questions, comments.
Thank you so much, Christina. I really appreciate the work you and your team are doing in the region. And it's great to hear a little bit more of your perspective and how you get this done. So I just wanted I realized that we have limited time today. So I was meant to do conclusions, but to be very frank, I think I would prefer to move on to the questions and answers as soon as possible. I just want to remind you about some of the information regarding the the NICFI satellite data program. So to access it, and this actually answers a couple of questions from the Q&A. If you want to register, this is available. Anyone can sign up and use the data to revert and reduce deforestation in the tropics. You just need to go to planet.com/NICFI, and there you will find all the information necessary to sign up for the program. It's very simple. Please experiment with that. And if you have problems, you can reach out to us and we will help you. There's one of the informations in this website is for our help desk, like Charlotte mentioned. So we're very accessible and we will make sure that you will be properly onboarded. Next slide, please. So, and if you want to learn more, if you're not so familiar with Planet products or remote sensing even, so the use of satellite imagery, we have courses, we have documentation, resources, and we have examples like the ones shared today from the different organizations. We have a couple of those and more in our community page. So these links that will be shared with the slides later on, you can refer to them for more information. And there's also still with the Twitter logo, now X, our program account, where we share information that could be useful for our community of users, but also sometimes we do share some of these stories in different formats, like for example, the post that Christina was mentioning that was viral, we're also helping that happen. So please check out that and use that to keep in touch and to know what's happening on our end. Next slide, please. And now I think we're ready to kind of move on to our Q&A. We have some minutes and I would like to start by asking Charlotte to come on microphone again to maybe help clarify some of the most pressing questions about the NICFI satellite data program. I saw some in the chat that refer to the footprint, so what data, where data is available and why not, some concerns about clouds, and also if the data will be available after September 2024.
Okay, where shall we start, Louisa? Maybe I can just pull up some of the questions that I saw coming in. So I saw there was a question about access outside of the tropical forest region, so in European, Mediterranean region. So that the focus of this program is specific to the tropical forest region. So that's out of the scope, I'm afraid, of this program that we're talking about today, to include the European forests. And the reason for that is that really the tropical forest areas represent such a large land mass of area that where the deforestation is happening is having a significant impact on climate change as well. So that was really the focus from the Norwegian government, who funded the program, was that it needed to focus on the tropical forest region. And I noted also that there was a question related to Australia. I wondered if someone might pick that up, to be honest. Yes, you're quite right. Australia does have, of course, tropical forest areas as well. That you may have noticed there are a couple of other areas that are not included in the program that are forested areas within that region. And that is because the focus of this program is on those areas that don't have significant data sets available already. So Australia has a lot of aerial, other satellite data sources that are a little bit more accessible, and a number of the other tropical forest countries have a lot more barriers to access satellite data in general, and therefore those were the areas of focus identified by the Norwegian government when this program began. So that's why Australia is not included in this. The question related to clouds. So as I mentioned in my presentation, we have high cadence imagery, so we're able to reduce the impact of clouds, but we have different processing when we're doing the collation of the mosaics. So we're looking for the best quality pixel in the images that were collected in that month that has the least cloud effect. I don't want to go into too many details. I know we don't have a lot of time, so I will, maybe we can put a link in the chat to draw your attention to, we have a base map addendum document that explains in a little bit more detail the method of how this data is corrected. So if you would like to find a little bit more, we can make sure that link is available. And the last question, I've seen it asked a few times about the kind of end of the program and what happens and if the data will still be available. So the program does end in September 2024. Some of you may have already seen on LinkedIn, it was announced during COP last year that the big UN climate change conference, that the Norwegian government, along with Bezos Earth Fund, have made some money available for a new contract for this program. So that will be a new procurement for this program that they hope to start after September 2024, and therefore this program ends. Exactly what that looks like, we have no more information. As soon as there is more information that's public, of course, we can discuss that. But any data that you have used to this point, this is a perpetual license of access to data. So if you are using this data and you'd like to still use it after September 2024, the license allows you to do that as long as it's within the purpose of the program. Hopefully that was very kind of quick run through. I'm happy to go back, and please use our help desk as well if there's a question that I've missed or you need some more clarity. I want to make sure that everyone else has a chance for questions. So Louisa, back to you.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. That was an amazing summary and a really quick overview. I hope that the people that posted these questions managed to catch the information. If not, please refer to our resources because this information is all there. And again, we are very easily reachable through our help desk. So don't hesitate to send us an email. So next, maybe I would ask Andre to come on camera again and help share a little bit more of how this kind of data has been helping you, or how do you work to link local activities at the farm plot level to buyers in national and international markets? Could you share some other data that you've been using, for example, databases, resources? And I guess again, maybe a overarching, what are your step-by-step? I guess can be a very detailed answer, but maybe you have like a mental structure or mental framework that you could share for people to be a little inspired to maybe do the same thing in their territories or with their problems.
Yeah, sure. Well, about the trading data, this kind of that part of our tripod, certainly this is one of the most difficult ones, because when you talk about accessing, commercial data, financial data, many instances, many contexts, this is something that companies, the actors involved, they don't want to show it, So this is basically something that we treat as part of our investigative journalism approach. I mean, I think it really that doesn't have like a clear path to how we can do this. Certainly what we do in Brazil is not going to be necessarily very useful in other countries, but I would say that basically we rely on first having sources that know about our work and that have access to this kind of data. I'm talking about people that with relevant access that give us relevant information for us to work with. Another very important thing for us is to understand where information is registered and what's the bureaucracy around, trading. And in many contexts, we are able to access information about trading of particular products inside of that bureaucracy, like for instance, sources that can grant us access to cattle transit permits that would allow us to connect farmland to a company, invoices of substances, and in some cases also knowing where we can find this kind of information. We rely a lot in freedom of information requests to the government, because a lot of this trading information is also held by government bodies in some contexts, and in some cases we are able to assess like this. That's it. But how it starts and the working map of it, it really varies a lot. Sometimes it starts with us receiving a lot of information about a huge number of suppliers of a number of companies there. Then we are going to scan these ones one by one, try to see if there are issues. In other moments, the problem starts on the ground, in a particular area where the issue is occurring, an area where we know about deforestation or other issues, human rights issues, modern slavery, and then we are going to dive in this area and try to understand if we have other information that could lead us to supply chain information. So it really varies a lot, but the idea is always trying to be constantly looking for information in all of those fields, so we can like match the pieces together when the time comes.
Thank you, Andre. I think this is really helpful. I can imagine that your work is super specific to the situation, but it's great to that you can share a little bit more about how you think through it. And I hope that was helpful for the people that wanted to hear more about it. So maybe as we progress, let's see what else can we cover right now. Maybe I would ask the colleagues from Mighty Earth to answer a few questions. So Jackson, we had a question here about open source data and its suitability or not for UDR due diligence. Would you want to comment on that? Maybe give Mighty Earth's perspective on that question?
Yeah, sure. So there's been a lot of discussion recently. I think many of you have probably seen this on your LinkedIn feeds about whether or not open data is suitable for monitoring forests for a wide range of commodities. And the folks who say that open data is not suitable, I think, tend to distill into a few arguments, the most important being about scale. And so as algorithms are created to detect forest cover and then subsequently detect forest cover loss at a global scale, it often, I think, misses the complexities on the ground. And the argument against open data then is that, okay, we cannot use open data sets for really fine scale forest monitoring. I think that is a little bit of an oversimplification, because as folks at Reporter Brazil, our colleagues at Aid Environment, we do as well at Mighty Earth, is that when we're looking into deforestation events, we're drawing on a wide variety of open source data sets, and then confirming that with satellite imagery and often ground truthing as well, which really speaks to the complexities of the on the ground reality. And so absolutely, there are error rates with open source massive scale data sets, but they often, I think, provide a really good, strong foundation for investigating forest loss alerts further. And I don't think anybody is advocating for taking one open source data map and one GLAD alert or RAD alert and saying that is definitely deforestation for soy or cattle or palm oil. Rather, we are really working to combine many different layers and many different layers of analysis to determine whether or not deforestation can be linked in these supply chains. Does that answer your question?
That was a fantastic answer, Jackson. Thank you. And I want to echo that as well, that there's starting to consensus almost is starting to emerge that data complementarity is the best way to go. So there's not one solution for this complex topic of EUDR or alert and deforestation and analysis of forest change in general. So we do need to take advantage of what's available and really use them together. So now I think that we also had some questions for Christina. I think some people were curious about the specific minerals that are being sourced in the regions that you're working and where you're focusing your activist work on. And I would actually like to add a question from a perspective of your work is a bit different from the other two presenters. And I would like if you could share a little more on what do you think is the biggest advantage of having this kind of data, and how you would advise other people that want to have a bit more attention from their communities to what kind of actions they could take that potentially even beyond the ones that you're already doing. So maybe other ideas that you have that you could share with others.
Yeah, so Venezuela is blessed with pretty much every mineral found on Earth because it's this region is extremely old. It's Precambrian. So that for the same reason that we have so much oil in the northern part of the country, we have all the minerals in the southern part of the country. But because it coincides with the Guyana Shield and Amazonia, previous democratic governments in the 20th century protected this area. So 80% of all that area that I presented is actually protected. Having said that, there's every kind of minerals, but the majority of the minerals that are being mined nowadays are gold, for the most part, but also diamonds, coltan, rare earths, a whole list. But unfortunately, all of these minerals are being mined in this chaotic, criminal way. And then, with regard to your question and civil society, I think you know, part of what we're doing. I mean, we're denouncing and we're measuring in a very factual way, but we're also educating. We're educating the public in Venezuela and outside of Venezuela. So this is such a remote place, and it's so difficult to get there for many different reasons that the majority of Venezuelans have never set foot in southern Venezuela. And so in a sense, we're educating civil society about this very biodiverse, incredible place, which is part of our country and that very few people know. And we've seen how, you know, as these maps and these little videos go viral, we see how people start mobilizing, and they care, And over these 5-6 years that we've been doing this, we've seen how civil society and other NGOs and people on social media have become very active. So I think there's a piece there which is educational.
Absolutely. And I guess that, I mean, even if your pieces and your work ends up being viral, that's really a good response. Actually, because it ends up being viral, that means that people are engaging with it and they're really feeling a connection. And
Correct.
I guess that's a really good, strong signal that there is an interest in this kind of communication and these topics. So maybe that would be the encouragement that everyone should get to experiment and see how their communities and their audiences respond to that type of engagement,
Absolutely.
which is very, very appealing as well visually, right? So that's definitely an advantage. So I would now maybe, I've seen a couple or quite a bit questions in the chat about functionalities in GFW, the capabilities of using the platform together with the satellite imagery to track deforestation, do estimates of deforested land, look into specific activities if it's related to mining or logging in different geographies. I don't know if Jessica may want to come on camera and share a little bit more about GFW, how you can find more resources. I'm sure there's a lot of trainings and materials out there. So maybe back to you, Jessica, to help a little bit further on this.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Louisa. Yeah, lots of great questions. I tried to answer some of them in the chat. But you know, of course, if we don't get to your question today, feel free to email us after. We'll put that address up after this before we conclude. But yeah, a couple questions that I saw. There was one question also about geographic extent and coverage of the data being limited to the tropics and specifically not being available for Patagonia. Charlotte already answered the question about the extent of the satellite imagery offered through the NICFI program, but wanted to clarify on the Global Forest Watch side that we do actually have quite a number of data sets that are available globally, so not just for the tropics, including the tree cover loss, tree cover gain, net change, fires data, including tree cover loss from fires, fire alerts, a lot of the forest carbon data, greenhouse gas emissions, removals, net flux, those are all global. So there is data there. The deforestation alerts specifically are not available globally, which might be something that you're interested in. And we heard a lot about this in this presentations today. We are working with partners at the University of Maryland, who produce also the GLAD alerts that many of you are familiar with, on creating a global alert data set. So this is in the works. It's going to take a while because it's a lot of data and information, but we're hopeful that next year that will be available. So stay tuned for that. I saw a question too about clarifying how planet layers show up on the Global Forest Watch dashboards in addition to the map, and how that relates to the analyses. So the planet imagery is available in the dashboard section as well as the map. But as in the map, it's used primarily for contextual, to give contextual information to the analyses, and visual information about being able to see what's happening underneath the analyses layers. So, but it works very much in a similar way to it does on the map. So you can access the planet imagery on the dashboards as well. I saw a question from Peru about mining activity and how Global Forest Watch and related data, including the planet imagery, might be used for that. Yes, of course, it depends a bit on the type of mining, but a lot of the gold mining happens alongside rivers in Peru. Certainly you can see a lot of that in the imagery, and the tree cover loss data, deforestation alerts can be very helpful in indicating where mining is happening, following its progress if areas are growing. So certainly useful for that. In terms of relating that to georeference data for mining activity, we do also have on Global Forest Watch in the land use category a data set on mining concessions. So you can also see where, if you toggle that on, you can analyze how much tree cover loss or recent deforestation alerts are happening within those concessions, and also where those concessions might overlap with indigenous territories or other or be adjacent to protected areas, right? So you can understand the dynamics of those and do analysis through the platform. And then lastly, I saw a question about cocoa in Nigeria. On Global Forest Watch, we actually just, I think 2 weeks ago, launched a couple of new cocoa data sets. Unfortunately, they're only available right now in Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, but hopefully can expand to other countries in the future. There's a West Africa cocoa data set, which includes a data set of mapped cocoa plot boundaries and also cocoa deforestation risk assessment. So you might want to still take a look at those and see kind of what's possible. And then of course, the data and imagery on tree cover loss or deforestation alerts, the planet imagery can all be useful too in doing some of that monitoring and investigation from either your laptop or your mobile device. I think with that, I'll pass it back to Louisa for any other questions for our panelists before we wrap up.
Yes, thank you so much, Jessica. And that was really good overview. Sorry, cat crossing. I really enjoyed the rundown of most of the questions related to GFW data and functionality. So I hope that most of the audience feels now a bit more confident and a bit more clear around how to use your platform. So maybe I would just ask Phil to maybe come on camera and tell us maybe a bit more about if you have any specific plans of how you can further use geospatial data and satellite imagery in your work. And because I know you've been using this kind of data for some time, what's next? Are you going to experiment? Do you feel they're going to try out new things or different geographies or analysis? Maybe you can share and give us some ideas.
I mean, when we started the rapid response for palm oil, palm oil was pretty much the largest driver in Indonesia and Malaysia. The rates of deforestation for palm has come down as companies have adopted no deforestation policy, and companies have seen that developing areas with forests is no longer viable. So we sort of extended our work to look at conversion of forests into timber plantations, particularly in places like Sarawak and Kalimantan. Some of the palm oil groups, sort of diversified groups, they have palm oil operations and timber operations. Some of the bigger groups have not only interests in palm oil, but they also have interest in mining. For instance, Jardine's a big conglomerate which owns a palm oil company, also own a mining company in North Sumatra. So they're developing this area in an area where there's been identification of a new species of orangutan called tapian orangutan, and we've been using the imagery for that to monitor that. We've been engaging with the company and various articles within the FT about that mining expansion. We are, I mean, as Jackson explained, we've sort of ventured out into the critical minerals debate, and we're sort of getting out foot through the door on that and trying to figure out how we're going to influence that. But I think it doesn't matter really what commodity is. If the commodity is driving large scale deforestation, it needs to be addressed somehow. So I think it's all about access to the right quality of data, and we have access to concession data for Indonesia and Malaysia. You can get access to concession data from the Roundtable Sustainable Palm Oil. but in places like South America for palm oil, there's a growing development of palm oil there, and access to data is not there. So we have to sort of, we have to sort of focus our efforts on where we can get access to the right quality data and the supply chain links, etc. So it doesn't really matter where or what the commodity is. Is it driving deforestation? Is it sold on an international market? Is there a buyer that we can influence? So watch this space, I guess.
Yes, I guess you just.
But I think that I think that part of the big battle, I mean, thing I was going to say, I mentioned about Global Forest Watch, is when you don't have access to really, really high resolution, the Global Forest Watch gives you access to tree cover loss, cloud alerts, historical, and sometimes you have to not just look at snapshots of before and after. You've got to look back to see if there's been any previous development to confirm whether or not it's was forest that was cleared. So GFW is a sort of one-stop shop to look at all data sets available to try and do your analysis. You don't just rely on planet imagery, you rely on everything that's available to do your analysis.
And I guess that's the perfect way to wrap us up. Jessica, I think you're gonna do our goodbyes before we close for today.
Yes. Thanks so much, Louisa. Thanks to all of our speakers, and thanks to you all for joining us today. This has been a fantastic discussion, very inspiring, lots of new ideas. Just wanted to wrap up. Thank you all, especially our partners at the NICFI Satellite Data Program for supporting Global Forest Watch and co-organizing this webinar. Before we close, just wanted to point out a few ways to stay connected with Global Forest Watch. To learn more about how to apply Global Forest Watch in your work, please visit our Help Center for tutorials, guidance, webinars, and more. All of the content on the Help Center is translated or available in English, Spanish, French, Portuguese, and Bahasa Indonesia. You can also subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on social media at Global Forests for the latest updates. And lastly, we'll have more webinars, events, and videos like the one featured here on the screen with our partner Justice from Hemapuano in Ghana that will be released throughout the year as part of our Voices of the Global Forest Watch campaign. So please stay tuned for more. We welcome you to participate in future events and share your story with us. Lastly, don't forget to complete our webinar survey, which you will see in just a few moments, to share your feedback and let us know what other events you'd like to see from Global Forest Watch. And of course, you can also email us through the website or at gfw@wri.org. Thank you again for joining us. Goodbye.